Hey everybody, how's it going? So this is a new one here at the channel, which is going to be really exciting. If you're actually watching it on YouTube, you'll be checking it out in segments. Each discussion segment and the pitch segment will be its own separate upload. And then if you're watching it or I guess listening to it on platforms such as Spotify, SoundCloud, and iTunes, it should just be one long audio track, but with probably time markers listed in the description for your convenience. And today I am joined by Brandon Katz from The Observer, formerly known as the New York Observer. And you can find him on social media platforms like Twitter with the username great_Katzby, which I think is hilarious. But yeah, Brandon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Josh. I'm excited to talk a little entertainment.
Yeah, we've been kind of trying to do this forever, so I'm happy to finally be able to pull the trigger on it today. But yes, so our topics today, if I didn't already mention it, the first one, we're talking about the sequel trilogy for Star Wars, kind of the legacy of that going forward, since hopefully for when you guys are listening to this, it will be the release weekend of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, technically cementing the final part of the Skywalker trilogy. And then after that, our next segment, we're talking about toxic fandoms here today, which some people may or may not connect to things like Star Wars or the DC films or even the Marvel films, really, considering how ravenous that fan base could be. And then we're going to be transitioning to something I'm personally really interested in talking with Brandon about, which is the streaming wars, which seemingly is just at the beginning of what may be a very long era of subscriptions coming out of my wallet. Ending it off, our pitch segment is basically acting as if Lucasfilm goes to either one of us and basically says, look, the Skywalker saga is over. We need a new face, a new trilogy for this Star Wars franchise. Pitch it. You know, we've kind of touched upon it a little bit, but we haven't gone fully into it. But I can tell it's a very easy transition. Toxic fandom. With toxic fandom, I mean, I think the most recent examples of what you would call blatantly toxic fandom is definitely the responses we saw after the Last Jedi. Certain things also, like how people were reacting to Captain Marvel before it even came out, just because of misconstrued comments from Brie Larson, which weren't even accurate to what she was talking about. The Snyder Cut stuff, if you're a WB intern for social media. But like, what are your thoughts on that? Like from your perspective, because I got to think that that's something that comes up a lot in the editorial room is, you know, fandom this, fandom that, and just kind of like, what are your thoughts?
Well, at Observer.com, I did do a pretty deep dive exploration of toxic Star Wars fandom. And what I define as toxic fandom are quote unquote fans, and I do use air quotes because I don't think these people are true fans, that purposely and intentionally engage in targeted harassment of talent, of creators, of executives that express opinions or beliefs that don't necessarily line up with their own. Now, passionate fandom is completely different. Now, I am not the biggest Zack Snyder fan in the world. I understand why people do like his vision for the DC films. And if you are a hashtag release the Snyder Cut type of individual, that in and of itself is completely fine. All you want is to see a product that you're passionate about from a director you like. But is when those people and others that are in different fandoms, not just DC, when they start flooding Kelly Marie Tran's Instagram comments with horrible, racist, sexist remarks, when they start making targeted campaigns to lower the audience scores of Captain Marvel simply because they disagree with her on social and political issues, that is toxic fandom. Weaponizing passion for an immoral agenda, and that is what I cannot stand.
With the Snyder Cut stuff, it kind of blows my mind because a good friend of mine and actually an editor here at HN, he's a huge DC fan of the movies and of Snyder's vision and all that stuff, and his view on it, he's more on the passionate side, not really toxic. His view on it is more like kind of the studio doing that to a director, if that makes sense. More so than it is about like the DC characters and, kind of that whole thing. But I think, when you're, trying to find where people live and you're trying to send them messages basically through any avenue, whether it's mail, email, social media channels, just to push that kind of agenda, as you put it, which I think was very, very well said, weaponizing passion, basically. within fan bases, I mean, I think that's where it goes too far. All of a sudden, you're choosing sides, becomes a very tribalism kind of thing, us versus them. One thing that was really interesting to me with the Star Wars stuff, since we were just talking about it, was I feel like toxic fandoms, and jump in if you agree or disagree here, but I definitely think they get worse with a lot of these older sci-fi, especially franchises, because places like Lucasfilm and other studios have already made pseudo expanded universe sequels of stuff. So you've already kind of given people like a way to think about the future and certain aspects of that film and of that media, and then you're giving them something totally different. So it's like, I don't. Do you get what I'm saying? Am I explaining this well?
Yeah, and I think that leads to an important question, and is it the duty of a studio and filmmaker to cater to those who critique or those who worship? Is it both? Is it neither? Which audience are you trying to appeal to, and what does that say about you as a storyteller and you as a studio? And that is where you get into some very complicated gray territory. Now, if there is an overwhelming sense that something isn't working from a quality standpoint, and it doesn't have anything to do with, you know, the ethnicity or race of the actors or things that are, you know, immoral, I can understand a studio saying, well, you know, audiences didn't like X, Y, and Z about our movie, so for the sequel, we can change things. But when you are deliberately going back to retcon certain choices made simply to cater to a small but vocal minority, then I think you're setting a very dangerous precedent for the future of entertainment.
No, I agree. I mean, when I saw things like people wanting to re-edit the film a certain way, basically, yeah, having petitions out there, trying to even raise money to remake the whole movie. Yeah, well, first off, you're never going to remake a movie like Star Wars. All right. The amount of millions upon millions of dollars that probably went into production of a movie like that is not going to be matched by a crowdfund. At least I don't, unless you know a billionaire in your crowdfunding. The biggest thing with me in the toxic fandom, it's not even about this sect of fandom, wherever there are fans. But with the modern day fandom, especially, we kind of touched upon it earlier, social media today, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like almost an echo chamber. And it's just so easy for this like mob mentality to really build. It really does suck, because I do think a lot of these movements, if you want to call it that, start from a good place, a passionate place, and then they get hijacked. Like the Snyder Cut thing, a lot of that started from people wanting to just see a filmmaker's vision of a film. They felt that Zack Snyder, whether his vision was good or bad, was unfairly and unjustly removed from his film. And kind of his daughter's death was basically used as a scapegoat, a lot of people felt, by the studio, especially with what we know now today with exactly how many changes were made from his original story to the theatrical cut. I mean, it's just crazy to me to think about, you know, like that was started by probably passionate fans, totally course changed. And I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous how it kind of spirals. And then with Star Wars, you mentioned it a few times now. I mean, to have an actress, basically, you know, the fan base blame her almost for a movie not being the way they want it is just kind of crazy.
It's scary to really examine the divide between fans and critics these days, and it is growing at an insurmountable rate. I have expressed opinions both strongly and delicately about certain entertainment topics and generated responses that ranged from anti-Semitic remarks to people threatening to fly to where I live and choke the life out of me. And that is just simply asinine. I cannot believe people would go so far, given the anonymity of the internet, and say such awful things. And I think that has also inflamed, you know, the critical side of it, where people who are employed by big outlets will antagonize because they've just been forced with this endless avalanche of toxic fandom. And it just makes the entire situation worse 360 degrees. Now, is there any easy solutions to this? No, but there needs to be a return to decency in the public online discourse when it comes to entertainment, especially when it comes to these monolithic blockbuster franchises like Game of Thrones, like Star Wars, like Marvel, where people are so passionate and that passion can be used to go down a dark path, not to kind of co-opt the Star Wars plot arc.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm going to try not mentioning the plot of the most recent release as much as possible, just because if I get started on that, it may kind of bleed into everything else, because I have quite a few opinions on the newest movie. But yeah, I mean, I guess to wrap up my kind of thoughts on toxic fandom before we move on to the next, because I mean, honestly,
don't do it. That's my thought.
You've said things a whole lot more eloquently and just more to the point than probably I would have. I probably would have done like 1,000 analogies by now to just get one point across. Again, you really summarized it well when you just said, when you're weaponizing the passion of fans and then, of course, hijacking on top of it to basically just turn what would be a constructive conversation and criticism about a piece of art or media, and instead kind of basically just trying to push propaganda against either an artist or a studio or just whatever. I mean, it does more damage, I think, than any potential benefit. Like any conversation you're starting through that method, it's not going to end in a very constructive manner, most likely.
Definitely not. And the hope going forward is that studios don't cave to that pressure, because these hostile, threatening, and hate-filled people out there should have no say in a story's direction.
It's just a slippery slope. I mean, the whole point is, I understand, a lot of people, they're going to make the argument, well, I've been a fan for X amount of years and this and that. If you're not the director of the film, sometimes you just trust the director. Or for Star Wars fans out there and fans of other things, whether it's Marvel or DC, that's why they have the whole concept of alternate universes. If you don't like that Superman's American, you can read the one where Superman's a Nazi, literally. I don't know. Toxic fandom's just, I'm assuming it's always been there, but it's definitely a huge byproduct of the modern day social media. Brandon, thanks for joining me today. It's been great. Feel free to follow Brandon on Twitter at @great_Gatsby. And yeah, well, I guess I'll just leave it off to you really quick to say any final thoughts.
I just want to thank you for having me on, Josh. It was a whole lot of fun. And for everyone listening, just keep loving entertainment.
For those listening on YouTube, feel free to subscribe, comment, like, share the video. And if you're on a platform like SoundCloud, iTunes, or Spotify, thanks for listening on those. I know it's probably a very long listen at this point. Hopefully it fit well with your commute to work or from work to home. And give it a share if you like, a little heart like on SoundCloud, and follow us, add us to your favorites on iTunes and Spotify, and we'll see you guys later.